Scott Shetler. I've known you on Substack now for, I mean, probably a year. I started talking to you
Yeah,
before
about a year.
I
Last
started
summer, I
getting.
think.
Yep, absolutely. And that was before I started getting really active on the platform. But you were one of the first accounts that I found that was focused on fitness. And not only did it become one of my favorite sources, not through Substack, but just online for all things strength and health. It it's extremely practical. It's extremely accessible to anybody, no matter what your level is, but it's also extremely entertaining and hilarious. Like, you're a really funny writer on top of giving really valuable wisdom because of how long you've been in the arena, how long you've been in the realm, not only for yourself, but train other people. Although I've read plenty of your past articles, I'd love to just hear a little bit about your past and how you got into the strength realm in the first place.
Yeah, man. Dude, I'm just a dork, man. I mean, there's nothing like, there's nothing special about it. I started, I was a skinny kid in high school, man, the 135 pound. I was in the band. I wasn't in sports, man. I was a really good drummer, really good well, I use percussionist loosely. I can really only read bass clef, treble clef. I always had to have our keyboard player teach me the bell parts so I could pass our tests. But I grew up hardcore into music. My activity was all BMX freestyle. I was a freestyle rider. I was really good at BMX freestyle, but I loved skateboarding and I freaking sucked at skateboarding. So I spent way too much time on my skateboard, but that was it, man. I was just a skinny dork, and literally like it was the end of 10th grade. I remember being in the lunchroom after lunch, standing there, and my girlfriend and her good friend Erica, they were standing there looking at me and they both cupped their mouths and started laughing and pointing at me. I'm like, what the? So when Stephanie and I are walking down the hall to go back to class, I'm like, what were you and Erica laughing about? She goes, Erica pointed out that when you stand with your feet together, your thighs don't touch. And dude, it was like I went home, I grabbed my Spider-Man comics, I ordered like the Charles Atlas, the dweeb getting sand kicked in his face books, and that's really what got me into working out, man. I mean, I asked my mom if I could join the Y, started lifting, but that led me into back then. So this is like I graduated in '93, so this would have been like '91. Uh, Back then there really wasn't much. It was like the bodybuilding culture. I was getting the bodybuilding mags like Flex and Muscle and Fitness, watching like American Muscle on ESPN, watching the Mr. Olympia and stuff like that. But, back then, we grew up with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone and all these action heroes that were jacked. And every skinny kid just wanted to put on muscle. So I started eating as much food as I could, started building muscle, started learning more about lifting, and that really was what planted the seed for my love of the gym and physical culture. And it was later when I was serving in the Navy, I met a dude. So I was stationed in Leonardo, New Jersey. That's where my ship was home ported at the Earl Naval Weapons Station. I had gone to the Monmouth Mall and I went into one of the fitness equipment stores and there was this big jack dude working there. We started talking. He told me he was a personal trainer. I'm like, what's that? So he pulled out his book, showed me all his certifications. We started talking. He told me how he trained bodybuilders in gyms. And I'm like, man, that's really cool, man. I think I want to do that. So when I got out of the Navy, started going to school studying health and physical education. I got a personal training certification on the side through ACE. I started going to my local gym. I was going to Kent State at the time. Can't read, can't write, Kent State. That's because I couldn't cut it for Ohio State. I figured you'd appreciate that. So we had this really cool basement gym called OptiFit, and it was always the hardcore basement gym that I loved, man. I loved that, just that, free weights, like rusty plates. The plates didn't match, so I'm working out at this place, got to know the owner. He told me about the National Strength and Conditioning Association. And still like online was just coming around back then. This is like 90, you know, 95, 96. I'm reading a lot of Bill Phillips's Muscle Media 2000 magazine. I became a huge fan of Charles Poliquin. And that's when I first learned what a strength coach was because he worked with athletes, Olympic athletes, NHL athletes, and stuff like that. I was starting to get interested in powerlifting because he mentioned this guy in his book, The Poliquin Principles, where he's talking about the reverse hyperextension bench by the name of Louis Simmons in the West Side Barbell Club. And that place became a subject of fascination with me. And I started learning about powerlifting and I started, there wasn't a whole lot out there at the time. But after I moved to Atlanta and I had learned about Westside Barber through reading, Louis' articles in Powerlifting USA, and that was right about 2000 when I started reading his articles, and I'm like, man, the stuff this guy is writing about is on another level. I started seeing the application outside of powerlifting because I'm working with some athletes at the time. I'm like, this is the way athletes should train. I'm still green when it comes to the West Side Method, but I'm reading everything I can. And that led me finally online. I found a guy, Dave Tate, in Elite Fitness Systems, elitefts.com. And Dave was a powerlifter at Westside who had started his own equipment company. So he's selling the Westside Barbell equipment, the reverse hyper extensions. He's also providing content online. He's selling Louis' videos on the West Side Method. So I started devouring everything that I could from that point on. And by 2001, 2, 3, I started dipping my toe in powerlifting. I'm training with the West Side Method at the time. And sure enough, in 2004, the GNC Show of Strength, which is the WPO qualifier for the professional powerlifting organization, is in Atlanta. So my wife and I go. She actually had a cousin whose wife was working for GNC at the time and got us great tickets. I went to the powerlifting meet and I see Louis Simmons walking across the floor. And I'm like, holy shit. And I went up to him, I introduced myself, and he was the nicest guy, man. He gave me his information. He said, if you ever need anything, call me. He talked to me for like an hour on the floor. So fast forward to 2005, I've been asked by the state director of the National Strength and Conditioning Association to speak at the Georgia State Clinic that year. He wanted me to talk about kettlebells because I was one of the only people in Georgia at the time that was training with kettlebells. I said I'd do it. I knew that Louis Simmons was using them at Westside Barbell, and I knew Ethan Reeve, who was the head strength coach at Wake Forest University, was using them as well. And I got to know Ethan on a discussion forum through Dragon Door. That was Pavel's, original kettlebell training forum. So I called both of them and I was like, hey, can I get some quotes or some info to use for my presentation? And Ethan was very nice. He gave me all kinds of info. We talked forever. And when I called Westside, Doris, Louis' wife answered. She said, Louis in the gym. I'll have him call you back. I'm like, this guy's not going to call me back. He calls me back like 2 hours later. We talked for 3 hours almost. After I got all my info from him that I needed, I'm like, well, thanks for your time. He goes, well, what have you seen with kettlebells? I'm like, dude, I'm a nobody who trains nobody. Nothing like you. I don't care. If there's something that you saw, I want to know about it because if it's something that I don't know, I want to know it. And he said, if you ever want to come up to Westside, come on. I'm like, man, I'm not going. Those guys are terrifying, man. They're but fast forward to 2015, I'm training a guy who's ranked number one in the 50-meter freestyle for Team Canada. He went to Auburn, 9-time All-American. We're getting him ready for the Olympic trials. And I said to him, I said, is there anything else, any stone that we haven't overturned yet? And he goes, do you want to go to Westside? I'm like, let's do it. So I called Westside and organized a trip for me and this Olympic hopeful swimmer. We go up and visit, and we go walking in. I was terrified. There were these mammoths walking around the gym. And Louis comes walking around the corner. He comes, this guy I'm with is 6'5". He's like 195 pounds. We totally look like we don't belong there because the average weight in there was like 280 pounds. He walks up and goes, you must be the swimmer. It's like, yeah, was it that obvious? So he took us and started working with us. And man, I mean, we worked for like 4 hours that day. He took me over to his office in the warehouse. He gave me all these shirts. He gave me all these books. He started asking me about what I did, what I know. And after that weekend, he invited me to breakfast with the crew the next morning. And he was like, you've got an open invitation. Anytime you want to come up and visit, you're more than welcome to. So for the next 4 years, I went up every chance that I could and developed as much of a relationship as you could develop with that guy. You probably heard some of the stories. He's kind of a hard guy to be around, especially if you're an actual member who trains there. But I was a visitor. I wasn't a member of Westside, but visitors could train there for free. He was more than generous with his time. And man, I never left there without learning something new. And I'm so grateful for the time I got to spend there learning from him. And he passed back in 2022. I'm really glad I got to get all the one-on-one time I did with him. And now his assistant who took over the business, they're doing amazing things, particularly with fighters and grapplers. Dante Leon is training there. They've got an amazing jiu-jitsu squad training there. They got their own pit in there with Dahlinger mats now. The new gym looks unbelievable. I mean, they're taking Westside for sport training to a new level. But that's really what was the foundation of my kind of personal methodology and that I use with a lot of my clients and athletes that I train. So, I mean, that is kind of a long-winded way of saying, but that's kind of how I got started, man, and a very fast track of the, like I said, I've been doing this for almost 28 years. A lot of that stuff's all blurred together now, but that was kind of how I got into it, just being some skinny kid, oddball skater, BMXer dude, and just kind of found my calling and, didn't look back.
I love origin stories, and just one off chance remark and smirk from a girl about your thighs not touching turned into this life trajectory where you're working one on one with a legend in
It
the women's wrestling.
it became my career, man. It literally became my career because my girlfriend laughed at me, and yeah, it was pretty cool. At least my thighs touch now when I stay with my legs together.
The power of moments. But what you just demonstrated in your answer is you're a history buff. You are a nerd, but that's what makes you so good is that you're not talking about just what you do. You talk about who you learn from, not only who you've interacted with, of course, being one of the primary modern day legends for powerlifting and strength training, Louis Simmons. But you talk back to the earliest time that we document strength training with every name that you could imagine, do posts on their methods, and then you describe it to how to make it practical, which is some of my favorite stuff because while I'm sure you have typical systems that you go by with your clients, you like you just described in Louis, how his curiosity allowed him to keep learning and never know exactly the way. He's always trying to find the next best thing. You seem to do that too by researching history, researching modern individuals, and then making incredible posts about them in different systems that could be considered.
He definitely influenced me in that regard because I remember him telling me that, we were talking about training fighters when I was up there one time, and his assistant Tom Barry, who's the guy that runs Westside now, um, he told me that he had Tom order all these old books from like the turn of the century because and Louis was amazed. He goes, when you look at these guys, not only how strong they were, but he goes, they all look like MMA fighters. They were all ripped, they were all muscular, they had amazing physiques, and they were doing like legendary feats of strength. So I'm like, man, I never even thought about those books. So I started, trying to find, like the books from Eugene Sandow and George Hackenschmidt and all that stuff. And then, another awesome meeting. I was watching this kind of a video podcast on YouTube. It's this dude out of Australia. He goes by Carved Out of Stone. I don't even know what his real name is because I've only watched a few of his things. But I happened to watch one of his interviews with this guy named Jamie Lewis. Um, who is kind of an online personality. He's powerlifted. He's an interesting guy. But they had this Irish guy in there named Connor Heffernan, and they were talking about old school physical culture and in Connor's book, The History of Physical Culture. And Connor, I find out, he's younger. He's a younger guy, but he had links to the Stark Physical Culture Center at the University of Texas, where Jan and Terry Todd, who are legends in the powerlifting arena. Terry passed away a while back, but Jan is still running the Stark Center. So I'm like, this guy's amazing, man. So I order his book. He's a real strength historian, and I start looking him up online. He's got this great website called Physical Culture Study. It's an online blog. So I buy his book. I read it. I'm following his stuff. And no shit, dude. This one day, I get this ding on my Twitter, and I don't really do Twitter too much, but I get this ding. It said Connor Heffernan liked your post. I'm like, no fucking way. So I go and I look, and sure enough, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I send this fanboy DM like, Connor, oh my God. I'm like hyperventilating through Twitter, and he's probably like, oh God, why did I do this? But he replied back, and we started a friendship, and he subscribed to my Substack, and recently he joined Substack, and I don't know if you're following him or not, but it's Physical Culture Study. That guy is the strength historian. He's amazing. If you can find his interview, dude, have him do a live. He's back in Ireland now, but man, he is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to strength history and physical culture. And I love his articles. I love his posts. I'm so stoked that he's on Substack. He's just a really cool dude. But I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I literally just finished reading his book, and I'm like, there's no way. And sure enough, it was him. But so it's so cool to see Connor on Substack now. And everybody who's watching this, go follow him. He puts out amazing stuff.
That's awesome. Good to know because I don't know if I'm following him yet or not. So I would definitely be looking into that, and I can put that in the post summary as well. So that's awesome to know.
Cool, man.
Fun to see you guys do a live and just riff
Oh,
off.
dude,
Great.
he'd probably never do it because he's like, oh my God, this guy's a freaking. I'll never get him to shut up. He's like a fanboy. I can't talk to him. No,
You're
but
showing
it,
your
it would
hand
be
about
cool,
that.
man.
It would be amazing.
Yeah.
It'd be amazing. So you've been doing this. You aged yourself, of course, in your original answer by saying when you graduated and how long you've been in. You just turned 50 years old, which
Half
is
a century.
wild. Yeah,
Yeah.
you did a good job. We talked about beforehand by cutting your hair off so you can't show the color of your hair, but
No
you look
gray. Yeah.
you look younger than me. So props to you because I'm more than 10 years younger than you, but you are
Wow.
also a living example of the power of focused effort in the realm that is strength and health. And um, you talk and write quite a bit about strength training throughout the lifespan. So longevity in strength training and not doing too much and finding suitable systems for you to start at a manageable level and then progressively overload to build for what's right for you based on your goals. Talk to me a little bit about how you've kind of modified or evolved your approach, not only for your personal training, but how you work with clients throughout the age span.
That's a great point, man. And it was honestly, it was really like, um, everybody says like when you turn 40, it all goes downhill, and that wasn't the case, man. I turned 40, I was still doing a little bit of powerlifting. I was feeling pretty good, probably because I hadn't started jujitsu yet. Um, but I was like, yeah, that might be bullshit, because I eat pretty healthy. I'm not a party guy. I live a pretty boring life, man. I get up, I go to the gym, I walk my dog, I train, I go to Whole Foods, I go to the gas station, I come back home. I mean, my life is very boring. I try to do some surf skating here and there, play some disc golf, but play my drums. That's about it. Um, but it was really about 42 is when I noticed when I noticed my first like, man, I'm not recovering as well, and actually I had switched to eating a plant-based diet back when I was about 35, something like that. And I do think that because I was not a big fruit and vegetable eater prior to that, I think the influx of micronutrients has certainly helped out. Like there, yeah, and I'm not a Spartan dude. I eat cookies and cake and shit like that, but I do eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. And honestly, I think including like really healthy whole foods into my nutrition has definitely helped. Particularly with recovery and stuff like that. But it was somewhere around 42 is when I noticed, yeah, I'm starting to lose a little bit of a step, so maybe I need to start modifying my training because I don't do the TRT. I don't do, I'm not on anabolics. I don't do any of that crap. I'm not a, I'm also one of those guys where like you do your thing, man. I'm libertarian, bro. Live your life the way you want to live it. As long as you're not hurting somebody else, I support your right to live your life any way you choose. But I just, for myself, I don't want to do that stuff, because I'm like, man, if my lifestyle can't help me maintain like healthy levels of testosterone, I got no business like helping people, do the same. So I do try to live a fairly healthy lifestyle, and I definitely think that that contributed to just feeling better as I've gotten older and stuff like that. But yeah, at some point you're going to lose a little bit of a step. It just happens. We age. We can't that process isn't going to change. Um, so I started modifying my training. I'm like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be hitting the max out, singles all the time. Maybe I should back off. Maybe I should start training at about 90% effort, heavy, but not grinding myself into a pulp, And then it was after I started jujitsu, right at the end of my 43rd year, um, I definitely noticed, okay, I got to dial it back some because I'm expending a lot of energy on the mats because I don't know what I'm doing. I am the spazzy white belt. I'm trying to outmuscle everybody on everything, especially my shoulders, my elbows, man, because you're framing, you're squeezing, you're all that tension. I always said the best way, if you want to bench press 200 pounds, start jujitsu doing a 300-pound bench press. You will be down to 200 in no time. So I had to dial back my pressing, so I had to start modifying my volume and stuff like that. And over the last decade, I've been, modifying, or near decade, since I was 42, I've been thinking, spending a lot of time like, okay, I see these people who are in their 70s still lifting big weights. I see these people, you always see that 85-year-old woman who pulled 220 pounds in a deadlift competition and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't, I don't think we need to resign ourselves to this longevity ideal that, we just need to do like Pilates and yoga and stretch and, all this stuff. I think we can lift some heavy weights. I think we can, resistance training is a really good thing for people as they age, so I wanted to find like, how can we not resign ourselves to just lifting light weights, higher reps? How can we still lift heavy weights? What's the right way to do it? So I've been hitting the books. I've been studying what people are doing. I'm talking to people. I'm seeing things with the people that I work with. I work with people from 8 years old to 80 years old on a daily basis, so I get to see kind of what their load tolerance is and stuff like that. So through a combination of just my personal study, seeing what people are doing out there, as well as seeing things empirically in the gym, I've kind of develop this whole let's not age gracefully. Let's go out, throwing punches, kicking and screaming, but let's do it smart so that we are maximizing our individual recovery and things like that. And that's kind of what I've turned my attention to lately. It's like, how can we still lift heavy, but how can we do it in a way that we can recover, and not run ourselves into the ground? Because that stuff does factor in as we get older, and a lot of the stuff is very individualized. If somebody starts lifting weights at 55, 60, 65 years old, that's not going to be the same as somebody who's got a foundation of lifting, since they're in their 20s or their teens or something, but they're also not carrying the mileage on their joints that that person who started younger is too. So there is a bit of an individualized component to all this, but I don't think that we just need to, trade in the heavy barbells for plastic, pink weights and stuff just yet. So,
I love using percentage perceived exertion
yes.
for a lot of the workouts that I do with functional fitness, or as you mentioned, percentage of max resistance. And
Yep.
tailoring approaches based on where you currently are, what your goals are, what else you're doing, and then what kind of history you have behind yourself. And it's funny you mentioned individuals at advanced age, both men and women. You see these videos of them pushing, pulling, and squatting enormous amounts of weight for their size because they're not jacked, but they're also not stiff. They're not walking around like they're just a strength based, adapted individual. No, they're a very
Sure.
functional individual who is strong, mostly through their neuromuscular system, not just their muscles.
Exactly.
And so, like,
Exactly.
that plasticity is throughout the lifespan. So these individuals, you would have to assume they didn't just start doing that when they were 80, but they also have probably been doing it a little bit more intelligently than a lot of the systems that maybe you'll see that are not well rounded or are not based in evidence or experts like you've done with your account, looking into what are the systems that make the most sense for someone's particular goals.
Well, to that exact point about the systems, this is where I've always been a fan of, the West Side method and the conjugate method and stuff like that. But it really hit me, recently, like when you think about what the system is, it's a system that trains multiple physical qualities concurrently on a weekly kind of a microcycle. If we talk about periodization and a weekly microcycle basis. If you look at traditional strength training, like linear periodization and stuff like that, it usually starts out with a block of, say, 2 to 4 weeks of higher rep work, like a preparatory phase of, let's say doing eights and tens. And then they move into their fives, because fives build strength and build muscle. It really is the sweet spot for building strength and muscle simultaneously. So they do a block of like 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 weeks of that. That's their base strength, right? Then they do a block of like 4 weeks where they move into the triples and they start, cranking up the intensity, right? They're lifting heavier weights in relation to their 1RM. And then they do a block of like singles or doubles, and then they go into the competition. Well, that whole process takes 12, 16 weeks. If you look at the way, Louis built his version of what the conjugate sequencing system or the conjugate method is, he takes absolute strength, he takes speed strength or dynamic effort strength, and he takes repeated effort strength or repetition strength, and he combines them into a weekly microcycle so that in 1 week's time, you're working on your max strength, you're working on your rate of force production, your dynamic effort strength, and then you're filling in the gaps with repetition method, which is kind of like hypertrophy. So in a weekly training cycle, we're training strength, we're training power and speed, and we're training hypertrophy. And it hit me. It's like when you hear a lot of these longevity people talk, somewhere between 30 and 50, the human body starts losing muscle mass, right? So we got to do things to build and maintain muscle mass. And then after 50, it's all downhill because every year you're going to lose a certain percentage of muscle mass if you don't do resistance training. Well, you find out that more so than muscle mass, we lose strength at a rate 2 to 3 times greater than we lose muscle mass. Okay, well, now we got to, lift heavier weights. We got to maintain, hit those type 2 fibers. We got to, build strength, right? But then you find out we lose power at a rate two to three times that we lose strength. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, if only there was a method that trains all those abilities on a weekly basis. Oh, wait, there is. So that's why I've started really revisiting I always use the conjugate method with my athletes and people that I train, but I never really considered it for the quote unquote athlete of aging, to borrow a term from Dr. John Sully Sullivan, who wrote the book The Barbell Prescription, and he's got a strength training facility called Gray Steel Strength and Conditioning, where he pretty much only works with the 50 and over population. He does some amazing stuff. I'm a huge fan of his. He's kind of in the Ripito starting strength, kind of atmosphere. But man, it's so inspirational to watch the people that he's working with in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, like lifting big weights and training, compound movements and all this. And he's such a cool dude. He puts out amazing videos and stuff like that. I really love watching Sully's stuff. So I definitely, anybody who's watching, check him out. So to borrow his term, the athlete of aging, I started thinking like, man, there's a way to tweak the conjugate method for that demographic. And that's what I wanted to do, was to kind of take what I knew, what I learned becoming a Westside Barbell certified special strength coach, everything that I've learned about that method. I want to take it, not apply it to the power lifter, but I want to apply it to the person in the 40s, 50s, and older who maybe would want to do a powerlifting meet, or maybe wants to get into jujitsu, or maybe wants to become like a Spartan obstacle racer, or maybe wants to do 5Ks, or maybe just wants to play with their grandkids, or something like that. I'm working on scaling that to that demographic. You know,
Or wants to do all those things like I wanna do for as long as possible. Like, you
as
literally named
long as
it,
possible.
but I like doing all of
Well,
them.
and that's what the concept of strength span is. Everybody talks about lifespan, everybody talks about health span, but I'm like, strength span is really where it's at, because it's about how we can maintain our ability to produce force, to produce strength, through the greatest possible segment of our life, hopefully until the day that we die. I want to be completely independent and training, like Haleo, man, he was training, he was training jujitsu up till when did he die? Like 97 or something like that.
And
I
he was
mean, I heard he was still training all the way up until then. That's
Yep,
amazing.
yep, coaching and actually training and rolling in his 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do so many deep dives. Like, you don't have long posts, but you're such an effective writer that it still feels like a deep dive into the history of a system, how you can actually practically use it if you're considering it as a beginner or an advanced athlete, along with some jokes sprinkled throughout it too, making fun of influencers and that stuff, which I always love. But my
Yeah,
favorite
I don't like a lot of those people, man.
it's very entertaining. Like, you don't go too hard in the paint, but it's funny enough to make the post entertaining the way I alluded to.
Well,
But my
I don't wanna, I don't wanna call anybody out. I mean, there's some great people out there. There's some people out there that are just, but, I'm just I'm a dork myself, man. For anything I could say about anybody, I'm sure you could find something to say 10. So I try to do it more in good fun.
it's
I want everybody to do
always
their
fun.
thing out there and have fun. That's cool, man. Do what you're gonna do. But some stuff is just so hard to take, man.
There's a lot of cringe out there, but like you said, it could be thrown any way. It could be said about us in different ways too. And when you do anything public facing and with the way that you do it, there's a lot more to it behind the scenes that maybe we don't know of, or maybe it is what it looks like, which can usually be cringe if it is just sell this product. It's this simple. This 6 minutes a day will change your life, and that's all you need to do this one exercise all the time. No progression, no variability. Just do this, and you'll have an 8 pack in 2 weeks. Of course, that's selling a product rather than actually helping you learn a system and then embody it yourself and grow from it. And but to each his own. But your posts and the deep dives into different systems of all of them, you already brought it up. Conjugate is my favorite too because you mention all the strength systems on top of muscular endurance with that as well, based on how you approach those higher rep days and the supplement workouts that you throw on top of it. But just 4 days. And what I love about that is you still have 3 other days in the week to train other energy systems, other adaptations to be a well-rounded athlete or pursue other types of sports and skills that you want to do. Because when you hear certain systems that require rest after a hard day and then you're training 3 or 4 days a week, it's hard to fit in other things. So what I love about Conjugate
Yeah.
is it breaks it up well, but you also
Well,
do a good job.
and you can even do it the way they're currently doing it now with the grapplers. They've combined the dynamic effort day. So now this is going to lengthen that workout, but and Tom Berry, who is in charge of Westside now, he's written extensively about how they do it now. So I don't want to. That's not my area of expertise. But what they're doing is they're combining their dynamic days together into one day. So he calls it the double dynamic effort day. And that's where they do it. And it sounds like a brutal workout because they're doing the dynamic effort box squats, they're doing the dynamic effort speed pulls, they're doing the dynamic effort bench press, plus well thought out supplemental and accessory exercises for all that. So, my dynamic effort days take me anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes. Theirs take like an hour and 15 to an hour and a half. And the amount of density that they are cramming into that. I mean, you've seen Dante. He's a freaking beast, man. Max Hansen. These guys are strong. They're conditioned. They're great grapplers, but their strength and conditioning program is solid. But this frees up. Now they're only strength training 3 days a week. So they have some plyo days, they have some stability days. It allowed because they're also grappling like all day, every day, and stuff like that too. So it gives them a little bit more of their energy reserve to direct toward their sport specific practice. So
And what you work into your post too is kind of what you alluded to is leaving something in the tank to be able to still live your life and not be sore, overtrained, and unable to walk the next day because you do too much with the time that you do train. So again, making it accessible to test yourself without risking injury or just doing too much, but because you're too sore to do anything for 3 more days before you can show up for the same exercise. So I love systems that give you an approach to get
uh,
after it at a reasonable level for you and then be able to show up the next day, probably for a
and
different
that's
energy system, but come back to
that's
it.
the concept. That's the concept of training at 90%. And while Louis and his crew didn't do it, I mean they were pedal to the metal 105% all the time, contests in the gym, they put their bodies through the paces, but he always preached maintain 90% readiness all the time. That way you don't have to take a 12 or 16 week block to peak. He can peak, he always said we can go to a contest in 3 weeks. We just have to do a taper, because we stay at 90%. So I took that. If you study the maximal effort, if you read Vladimir Zatsiorsky's book, The Science and Practice of Strength Training, he talks about the three methods to build or to create muscular tension, and it's the maximal effort method, the dynamic effort method, and the repeated effort method, which are the three methods Louis combined to create, what his version of the conjugate method is. But Zatsiorsky talks about it in his book, and the maximal effort method is not hitting a grinding new max every single time you come to a max effort workout, which is kind of what Louis did. He was able to get around that by rotating special exercises every workout. So instead of doing a traditional squat, they do a low box squat with a specialty bar. They do a rack deadlift. They do a deficit deadlift. They had variations of the main lifts, and that prevented accommodation. They would do a lift every week and do a new one every week, right? And that allowed them to max out every week. Or if they didn't get a record, they were still able to max out. I flip it and I say, well, let's just hit a 90%, or like you said, RPE. Let's hit a 9 out of 10. So it's heavy, but we still got something in the tank. And that's how we can modify the conjugate method to allow us to train heavy weekly without running ourselves into the ground. That improves our preparedness. It allows us to handle heavy weights on a regular basis. And if we got to take a deload every fourth week, cool, man. Just deload on that fourth week and then start the cycle new the following week. And that's what I've been experimenting with my own training lately, and I'll be writing about that soon. But stay at 90% year round. Like this hip hop artist I used to train, Stick from Dead Prez. He in one of the lyrics in the songs I love, he said, "If you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready."
I love it. And also, like, you can have progressive overload at 90%. You can change the rep amount, the set amount, the rest periods, and so many other factors of the stressor to still get better without risking, again,
Or
injury.
how about you do a different variation? And that's the problem with the conjugate method. A lot of people like my power lifters I used to train with back in the day, they'd always want to use a variation of the parent lifts that allowed for supra maximal loading and relate, so like let's use the squat for example, right? Um or the bench press, because I had a really good bencher. He benched 501 at 198, this guy Malcolm. He did a lot of board pressing and in his bench shirt. So he was always using a super hey, like he was handling 565, 585, near 600 pounds, but he never took it to his chest, right? And I'm thinking, like, how about the floor presses? How about the Kingbird bar bench presses? How about the things where we can't use 500 pounds? Maybe we can only max at 450 or 425. They never wanted to hear that. Same with the squats. Let's do the high box squats. Well, we got to break parallel on meat. Why don't we do low box squats? You know? So if you cycle harder variations of the main lifts, you're still getting a maximal effort stimulus, but the overall load on your nervous system is going to be much lower. So if my squat is 450 pounds, my below parallel competition squat is 450 pounds, but I use a safety squat bar, which is a big padded yoke around my neck with a 5-inch camber where it puts the weights out in front of my body and it feels like a front squat from hell. It's trying to bend you in half and break your back. I might only be able to max out with 315 pounds to a low box. But if it takes me the same amount of time to do that 315 off the low box as it does to do my 450 competition squat, and I raise my low box squat, my competition squat's going to go up. And I did it at a lower CNS cost because I only have to handle 315 in the lift and not 450. Does that make sense?
100.
Use the harder variations, man. I mean,
Very
and it
variable lift
allows us to get
all.
more out of lighter weights.
Love everything about that. What a great way to have variability within the same movement and cause probably adaptations that you wouldn't get by just staying on the same movement
Yep.
anyway. We talk
The
about
problem, the people don't
functional.
like it because you got to put the ego in the back pocket, and you're not going to have 5 plates on the bar for the Instagram photo. You're only going to have 2.5 or 3 plates. It doesn't look it. You got to put the ego in the back pocket, but dude, do the harder shit. That's what's going to make you better.
Yep. I mean, apply the ego to the competition if you are a competitor. And the 90% rule, I love that because with the exception of a few sports where you do need a peak based on like Olympic athletes, you want to peak in the Olympics, obviously, or certain types of athletes that have meets seasonally, you can name that. But man, 99.9% of even athletes that maybe have longer seasons where you need to show up for the sport, whether it's jujitsu throughout the year, of course, basketball,
Yeah,
football, we have long seasons. You can't just peak. You got to maintain. And then the general population, who's trying to peak? Who's trying to fade?
yeah.
We want to
You're
be on a
training
lift.
for life, man. Yeah.
I love everything
Well,
about
so in like jujitsu, because I work with a lot of jujitsu guys, if you compete, well, if you're competing IBJJF and you're doing all the big competitions, you've got to peak for pans in the spring. You got to peak for Masters Worlds at the end of the summer. You got to peak for Nogi pans at the beginning, in fall. Then you got to peak for Nogi Worlds in December. So there's 4 big competitions right there. You don't have an off season. You've got dips in between. And so maybe if you're doing the Atlanta Open or something like, okay, so maybe we don't peak for the Open, or if you're doing sub only or something like that, there's tournaments throughout the year. You've got to pick and choose when you're going to peak. So, this system applies so much better to being ready throughout the year. And even if you're not at your peak, you're pretty damn close to it being at 90% year round. So then you pick, okay, maybe we're going to peak for Masters Worlds and Nogi Worlds. And then, we'll make those our big tapers, but then we'll just go into pans at 90%. We'll go into Nogi pans. We'll go into the IBJJF Atlanta at 90%. You know what I'm saying? So it just makes
quality of
more sense.
quantity. Absolutely. You were about quantity of weight rather than quality of getting better and supplementing what you could do with that weight when it matters or moving it up in different ways. Yeah, the variation of movement is such a good point. And you write on that very well. You give 10 ideas for every type of movement, whether it's a squat or a pull or a push, and like you just did in your explanation. Mobility versus strength. I mean, you used to have that. You had to pick one. If you want to be a really flexible swimmer, you should be training strength because you'll be too stiff. Or if you want to be really strong, don't you do mobility because then you'll ruin the fibers. You'll ruin that. Of course, we know better than that now. Again, for the general population too, even if that were true, you pick one, you're going to risk and limit yourself to injury in the other. When you help individuals with mobility, is that within the technique of the movements, or is that supplemental, or both?
It's both.
Yeah.
Because, and I learned this from Louis actually. One of his favorite ways to improve hip mobility, wide stance box squats, then you just take an inch out at a time, because the weight pushes you down deeper and deeper and deeper, man. It'll open up the hips. He had a lot of success with some NFL players doing that. So when you lift weights through a complete and full range of motion, you're building not only range of motion in the joint, but you're building strength through that entire range of motion, which is something you don't get with just passive flex, which I'm not against stretching. Stretching is important. It should be treated as its own workout, though, and most people don't do it. Most people stretching. I don't get anything from stretching. It's because all you do is you touch your toe 2 times after lifting for an hour. Stretching should be its. You need to stretch as hard as you're training if you want to get the improvements in the length of the muscle. But so yeah, so stretching should be its own workout. I believe it should be done later in the day after your nervous system has wound down. I mean, it never made sense to me if I do a heavy strength session, my nervous system is jacked up for the next 2 hours. If I stretch during that time, my nervous system's just going to tighten those muscles back up. If I want to get, if that's the only time you can do it, do it. But I'd rather do it when I'm winding down at the end of the day when my body's calming down, mobility work, dynamic, joint mobility. I think, I've got a joint mobility series I like to take people through. Active range of motion, I think that's very important. I think that can be treated as a tonic. I'm not a big warm up guy, but I think that can be a great way to prep for some heavy lifting. Do some joint mobility, do some dynamic, movement because that is range of motion actively. I think that has a tonic effect on the nervous system. And I think that can be really, really good. But I don't believe you should have some big, long, drawn out warm up before you go in and lift. But I do think that's a great place to stick some active range of motion, some joint mobility and stuff like that. But it can also be its own workout. You could do it on a recovery day. I don't believe in taking a day off and sitting on your ass all day. I like to swing some Indian clubs. I've gotten a little bit into that rope flow that NC Min Yang's been doing, the David Weck stuff. I don't think that's its own training system and that's the only thing you need, but I think it can fit in, because there's no recovery cost. It enhances recovery. It helps you move better. If you're going to take an off day, do stuff like that, man. That way you're getting some active movement, you're getting some blood flow, you're speeding up recovery, swinging Indian clubs, doing some light kettlebells, going for a hike, going for, there's so many things that you can do to facilitate recovery than the old, super heavyweight power lifter thing of sitting on your ass in a recliner, watching YouTube or something like that. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, mobility is important and you get it through lifting and you get it through joint mobility, specific joint mobility and passive range of motion work as well.
rest when you're asleep, recover when you're awake. There's ways that you can actively recover without having to get after it, and, yeah,
So
that helped quite a bit.
my old so a Navy guy, you'll appreciate it. Actually he's like you, he's up in that O country, and unlike us dregs down there in the enlisted, Jack. But a guy named Jack Reap, he was a Naval Academy grad and he flew helos and C-130s for the Navy. He's retired now, but he competed on the Naval Academy's powerlifting team when he was at Annapolis, and he powerlifted his whole career, and that's how I met him. He kind of became my powerlifting consigliere. He's the guy that I call on my way down to a meet, give me my pep talk, tell me what to do, tell me how to prep for my meet and stuff like that. He's a great guy. But he used to say that there is nothing that you've done to yourself that's so bad that 5 good meals, a gallon of water, and a good night's sleep won't allow you to recover from. People take this overtraining thing way too far. Overtraining is a real thing, but none of us are in danger of it. Most of us are just, we need a little bit more sleep. We need a little bit more calorie. We need a little bit more hydration, and we're going to be good to go. So
Yeah, you kinda answered a question I was planning on asking, overtraining versus under recovery, and I feel like overtraining is real. Like we said, you can lift so hard when you're not ready for it that your legs your neuromuscular system is so smoked that you are a stiff board the next day and you can't move because you're just not adapted yet, and that would
I
be
think those crazy athletes going through buds during Hell Week, they're probably overtrained, but that's not us, you know?
they're properly training the soul, but overtraining the neuromuscular system for sure. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But yeah, under recovery more often than not, it's a problem rather than overtraining. Overtraining is real, but more often than not, I agree with you. And a lot of times people go hard on the rest while they're awake, and that's not helping you recover in the same way as walking, doing chores, or other skills that you might like doing that have you on your feet and moving, where you're more likely to be stiff and have a harder time getting back to functional after a challenging day. So yeah, that was something I messed up quite a bit in my younger years.
Dude,
Um,
if I'm wrecked, going to jujitsu and just doing some light rounds, flow rolling, man. We sometimes have kind of an open mat situation on Thursday mornings, and a lot of times it's just me and one other. We haven't done it lately, but I remember, back in the day, my buddy Logan, who's an amazing grappler from my coach Chris's academy, Creighton MMA, he came down. We rolled for like almost an hour straight, but it wasn't a competition. I mean, he'd murder me in competition. I mean, he's an amazing grappler, but we just played tag, catch and release. We didn't stop. There were no submissions. If you grabbed something, you just let it go. But we just kept like a 60. We hit the cruise control and we just went 65 to 75% effort. We'd stop and chat or hey, what'd you do there or something like that. But for the most part, we just moved consistently for 45, 50 minutes. And at the end, I had a sweat. I wasn't sore. I wasn't achy. And my body felt invigorated. I'm like, man, shit, if you could train like this all the time, it'd be weird leaving the match feeling better than when you walked out on them.
And those technical roles, when you have the right training partner to where you both can maintain that 60 to 70%, it takes the right person. But man, is that so good for learning too. Not only is it great for
Yep.
recovery, mobility, and flexibility, but for learning too, because it's like a nice little blend of consciously applying things that you know, but also flowing and letting your body, like, what do you know subconsciously, practicing those
Yeah.
muscles. I love those
It
type
was cool. Yeah.
Good point. And it's worth noting now with these answers that you're giving and just how impressive you are on the mic, along with your writing, that you have videos in your paid tier where you explain a lot of these movements and you talk through not only proper technique within them, but other of these supplements or variations that you talk about. So that's another really cool thing about your account is you basically offer personal training through your Substack. You have all these free posts, which are incredible, but then you have this paid tier where you're basically offering what you do to your clients. And as you've mentioned already, Olympic level athletes, professional fighters and grapplers, and then just strength enthusiasts or people just trying to stay in shape. So that's a really cool part
Well,
of the
and
content
to
you
kind of
offer.
piggyback on that, I've been hammering it out for the last couple days. I'm going to start because I do a little bit of online coaching and stuff like that. But what I've been working on because I want a place where I could also because usually I just work with people like one-on-one video analysis. I do program design and stuff like that. But I put together a Discord group. So it's going to be my strength and health online coaching club. And it's going to be a tiered thing. There's going to be free access. There's going to be like kind of mid-level access. Then there's going to be kind of like premier level access. But I just set all the permissions today. I've got a little bit of content in there. Not a lot. Actually, my one online client, he just kind of QA'd everything for me and signed up today. So we don't have much of a community yet, but I'm going to spend the next few days putting a ton of content. But all my books are going to be in there. The Substack videos that I've done are going to be in there. I'm going to provide links to all my private YouTube videos. I have an exercise index with so many exercises from Indian clubs to kettlebells to strength training to joint mobility to stretching. I want to make it like a really, really good resource and provide even greater content that I'm doing with my weekly, video Substack. And anybody who's a paid subscriber of Substack, I'm gonna prorate their thing so that, it'll all be a wash in the end, they'll end up paying the same for access or whatever. But I just put that together. So it's going to live on my website. I'll be pumping it out on my Substack where people can go sign up. I got a little free uh, PDF download thing, to use as like a lead generation, capture emails and stuff like that, and that'll take them to the sign up page or whatever. So that is a community that I've been putting together for the last few days, and I'm going to be pumping some content in there, and it's just going to be like a much deeper dive than what I'm doing on my Substack. And the nice thing is they'll have access to so much content in there, and it's just going to keep layering up. And there'll be, in the coming weeks, there'll be like archives of all kinds of shit in there, and plus there'll be a lot more interaction with me, as well as people in the community. That's what I wanted was a way to do a community, and not just like work with people individually. I'll still do the individual stuff. Um, but I really want to build a community where people I'm working with can interact so people can start learning from each other and stuff like that. So I'm pretty stoked to see where this goes. But that's like my new project that I've been putting together right now. So
That sounds incredible. Yeah, and I love how you're tying it into the Substack to where you're not creating two separate things, but they feed together so you don't overwork yourself, so you can still get after it in your own way.
yeah.
But what a great
Well,
way.
and also too, I also wanted to, I love working with people, man. And unfortunately, like my in-person coaching, I'm really at about my max. I mean, I've still got a few appointment slots here and there. I've got some semi-private coaching groups that I do and stuff like that. But, I'm basically a one-on-one personal trainer, man. So my time gets eaten up. And at my age, I got to prioritize the sleep, brother. I can't be, staying up all night just adding hours to my day. So I wanted to find a way to do the online thing, but do it right to where I'm providing a lot of, I want to provide more value than what the subscription fees are because I just freaking love helping people. But I also want to see this as a way to start building like, an income model where like worst case scenario, man, I don't know what's going to happen in real estate. What if I have to get out of the gym business and I can't own my own facility anymore? I don't want to go work at a gym or something like that. And I still want to be accessible to people and I want to help people. And because I've written some books and because I do have a little bit of a presence online, I've had people contact me I've worked with people all over the world remotely. I just wanted to find a way to do it better, to provide a better service. And I kind of came up with this thing over the last couple of weeks. I've been talking to people, I've been doing some research online, and I think this is going to be pretty sick, man. So I'm looking forward at building this kind of strength and health coaching community, and give people a place where if they want a little bit of guidance, where if they want, access to some really good content, if they need a little bit of help, I'm there to provide it. And it just allows me to expand my reach, outside of what I'm doing, and in a way that's a little bit more coaching and quote unquote personal training than Substack allows me to do. So.
And you're great on the mic. Just like you are a writer, you explain things really well. And again, one of my favorite things about your account is like, while you do give program ideas, you more so like teach me methods so I can make them my own. I can add progressive overload into them, and I can you teach me how to become self-disciplined within strength. Like I don't need to go to you for every workout idea. I can get a system from you and then make it my own. So that's a really I'm going to be part of that for sure. Your Discord and how you level up. I can't wait to see all the things that you do with that.
Cool, man. I'll we'll talk after this, and I'll talk to you about it. And we'll get you all set up on it. But yeah, you can help me QA it too.
Yeah, sounds good.
but
Sounds
am I coming through okay now? Because I just I'm a Samsung phone user because I don't know, I just won't buy Apple products. But unfortunately, my charging port is also my headset port, so I'm like, oh shit, low battery. So I just had to switch to the regular mic. Am I coming through okay?
You actually sound louder and clear. You sound fine. Yep.
Okay, cool.
So I got a few shorter questions for you, and then I can let you go because I want your old ass to get good sleep tonight, so you keep looking young. Barefoot training, particularly with strength.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Huge fan of it. But I do get, I mean, there's shit in gyms that you may not want to be barefoot for. So I definitely, I'm actually I have more pairs of minimalist shoes and sandals than I would care to mention. I have Luna, which are my favorite. I kick around in Lunas all day. Shout out to Barefoot Ted. If you've ever read Born to Run, it's a fantastic book, even if you're not a runner. I've got Lunas, I've got Zero sandals, I've got Earth Runner sandals, I've got Zero shoes, I've got, Tier Drop Zero barefoot trainers, which is a fantastic training shoe. I've also got like the pedestal, basically the socks with the latex bottoms and stuff like that. I got Vibrams, man. I'm a huge fan of the minimalist footwear. And yeah, be as barefoot as you can be and tolerate, because there is something, and I'm, getting into the science of it is beyond the scope of our conversation. But I've actually got a colleague who's the director of exercise science down at Georgia College and State University here in Georgia. He did some studies with Dr. Emily Spleakle, I think her name is. She's Nabuso Technologies. They did some studies, I think, in the lab, like in force plates and stuff like that. Not the running, but strength training barefoot. And he told me a while back they saw huge reduction in lower extremity injuries and stuff like that. So as minimal as you can go, get the toes splayed out, get out of the shoes, get out of the coffins on your feet, get those toes splayed out, use spacers if you need to, but as minimal as possible, and spend as much time as you can and are comfortable barefoot for sure.
100%. Yeah, take those stupid socks off too when you're inside. Let the toes play out, like you said. Zero
Exactly.
shoes are my favorite for trail running and being outside when I do have to wear shoes. But good to hear because I'm barefoot for almost everything that I do unless I'm obligated to wear shoes.
I can't. I've got one pair of Vivos, and dude, I want the Modus Strength so bad, but there's something in me, just on principle, I will not pay $220 for a freaking pair of minimalist barefoot shoes. They look sick, but you know what? Props to Zero. I love my Zeros, man.
100%. So related to foot strength that we just talked about, our smaller muscles, we tend to forget about those. So forearms, our necks, our calves, our hands, our feet. These also have muscles in them. Go figure. And they deserve some time to be trained. How often do you recommend people focus on these smaller regions outside of the larger compound list that
The
you go?
smaller stuff can be trained more frequently because it recovers faster. You could train the small stuff every 12 hours. But realistically, I like if you can hit all your muscle groups 2 times a week, that's pretty good. And I would extend that to like your neck, to your forearms and stuff like that. That would be the minimum. But you could do the calves, the neck, the forearm. You could do that stuff more frequently, but at least, twice a week. I'm in my neck harness in between clients at the gym. They laugh at me. I'm bent over doing my neck raises. But dude, especially doing jujitsu, man, I've been slammed on my head. I've had my head slammed into the wall, and there's been times where uh I'm pretty convinced because I don't do a lot of inversion, but my neck training has definitely helped to buffer some of and mitigate some of the injury. Same with grip, man. I'm a dirty wrist locker, bro. It's my favorite. I've got all the Pete the Greek wrist lock the world videos. When he followed my gym page, I'm like, I can die now. I've made it. I love the wrist lock, man. The wrists are the ankles of the arms. So if you're going to foot lock people, wrist locking is right up there with it. So you got to have strong forearms. You got to have strong wrists. You got to hit those smaller muscle groups, especially if you're grappling, man. Your knees take a beating, your ankles take a beating, your wrists and elbows take a beat. You got to do the high rep blood flow stuff, the banded stuff, the knees over toes stuff, the tib raises, the calf raises, the wrist extensions, the wrist curls, the specialty grip training. You got to do all that stuff, man. Find a way to make it easy. Find a way to make it accessible. If you need some help with that, shoot me a message on Substack. I'll give you some ideas. But I train that shit all the time. I've got the luxury of being in my gym. I keep some weights at the house, in between, doing, movement snacks is a new term I keep hearing from people like Rhonda Patrick and people like that nowadays. I think it's great. Take a few minutes and do some neck. Take a few minutes and do some calf raises or tib raises. Lean against the wall like Ben, the knees over toes guy, does, and do your tibs against the wall. All that little stuff adds up, man. Not everything needs to occur within the 45 to 60 minutes you spend strength training on a daily basis. But yeah, that little stuff, do it because it pays dividends in injury prevention and longevity.
And I love your point about making them the movement snacks, like just throwing them in when you can fit it in without being a training block. You can just get that whenever. That can be a 5-minute break when you're at work rather than whatever else that you do when you take a break. That's a way to actually get your blood pumping and feeling good. Um,
Exactly.
Conjugate method, typically 4 days a week. What are you doing on the other 3 days most often?
So basically, I'll give you what my basically my weekly training schedule is. I basically Monday through Saturday or Sunday through Friday, usually something like that. So jujitsu, when I'm doing it regularly, is Monday and Wednesday mornings at 6:30, Friday evenings at 6 p.m. Those are my main classes. Sometimes we can get some rolls in on Thursday mornings. We have an open mat on the books at 10, but not a lot of people. But if somebody wants to show up and roll, I'm always down to train, man. I've always got gear with me. I'm always happy to train. A strength training, I do my max effort lower on Monday, my dynamic effort lower on Thursday, my max effort upper on Tuesday, my dynamic effort upper on Friday. Those take me anywhere from 25 to 40, 45 minutes, depending on what I'm doing that day and what my volume that I kind of auto regulate is. I try to do 1 day a week of some really high output, hitting, if we're going to talk zone 4 or 5 cardio. I use the Morpheus recovery app sometimes, so it'll be getting into that red zone on Joel Jamison's Morpheus app. Try to do that at least once a week, try to hit that threshold training once a week. I don't do a lot of specific zone 2 cardio because I'm not a zone 2 turd, like I said, but I think that lower intensity cardio is important, but we get a lot of that, that's the 30 minutes of drilling before my 30 minutes of rolling in jujitsu. We get plenty of that low intensity stuff. So when I am going to do cardio, I try to prioritize the higher intensity stuff. I try to get, 1 or 2 extra high intensity interval training sessions. Sometimes if I'm going out with a walk for my dog and she wants to run, I'll end up doing some sprints with her. So I do that stuff a little bit more loose, a little bit more off the cuff, but I'd say there's at least 1 to 3 additional quote unquote cardio sessions, 3 sessions of jujitsu, 4 strength training, and then I sprinkle in the movement snacks throughout the week. I also do, I've been studying Tai Chi since 2011. And I actually teach a couple Tai Chi classes a week. Basically, some people that come to me for some, privates. We do a little bit of the Yang and Chen style. I think Tai Chi is fantastic for restoration. It's fantastic for breathing. It's kind of a moving meditation for me because it gets me to slow down and focus on my breath. That kind of stuff's important, man. It's great for your blood pressure. It's good for your overall health. It's good for your balance. It's good for your movement, your mobility, and stuff like that. So I love that kind of stuff. I do a little bit of yoga every now and then. Um, my wife and I always do it on Thanksgiving. It's kind of a tradition. We used to go to her yoga academy for their holiday gratitude flow. So we try to do it on Thanksgiving. I wish I'd do it more often. But I think it's fantastic for movement and, the lower intensity stuff we could do all day, man. So I try to sprinkle that kind of stuff in as much as possible whenever. Sometimes life happens and I don't get as much of it is, but I just, try to do my best on a weekly basis. Um, so that's kind of what I'm doing on a weekly basis. I'm trying to do something every day. And even here at the house, I've got kettlebells. I got some light weights. If on a Saturday I'm obviously not at the gym because it's my one day off, I might do a little bit of arm work. I might do some shoulder raises. I might do some prehab stuff. I got some bands here, all that blood flow kind of stuff to help for joint, restoration and stuff like that. I sprinkle that stuff in throughout the week as well. So I always, I'm always trying to do something. I've got to be moving in some capacity, but I'm not like a neurotic spads either. So
And I love how you said jujitsu can be cardio. So based on the activities that you do and how you approach them, that absolutely can be cardio based on the output that you're doing and the intention that you're doing behind a different class or a role.
but unless you're like, and I'm going to call my training partner Zaman out because he's one of these guys that thinks bench press rules the world. He's what you would call a high calorie grappler. His go-to is the side control Americana, and he basically lays on his back and he tells me he gets cardio from jujitsu. I'm going to call bullshit on that right now. Zaman, you're not doing that. Get your ass in the gym, do some cardio, buddy. But yeah, jujitsu can definitely, we're training in and out of all the energy systems, from most people when you roll. And I try to pick, I can't roll hard all the time, but I try to pick every class. I'll take one training partner and we'll go at it, and it's somebody that I trust, that I know we can go hard, we can move fast, we can do that kind of stuff. The rest of my rolls are going to be, somewhere between 75 and 85%. And then I'm always going to have one roll that's going to be kind of like a warm up. And then I'm going to have a couple rolls where I just kind of cruise and just kind of play defense and don't move around so much. So that's kind of how I, because we always do 5-6 minute rounds on our Monday and Wednesday morning class. And then Fridays, my coach, Chris, and my facility partner I was telling you about, I actually used to be his strength coach when he got his blue belt, as we were talking about, and it's come full circle. Now he's running Nucleus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and under the same roof that I'm running my business. So it's awesome. You walk off the mats and you're right in the strength training area. So we've become facility partners and brought our businesses together. But that also meant I had to start training jiu-jitsu. Uh, but but I was going to say he started on Fridays in our Nogi class. He started 50-minute Fridays, so we do 50 minutes rolling. So it's like 10 minutes of drilling and warm up, and then it's 50 minutes of rolls, which has been fantastic. So that definitely can tick the box for cardio for sure.
Rollathons are definitely cardio. But to your point that I was going to make, you already said it, perceived exertion. So if you're on the mats and you're just playing defense and you're laying on your back, that's not exerting. You're not getting the same cardio someone who's intentionally based on their training partner or what they're doing in a role can get out of it. But again, what I love about the conjugate system is there's so much variability. You mentioned what works for you. The movement snacks, I love that. Anybody can do that. But if you are more endurance based because you're training for 5Ks and 10Ks, it doesn't mean don't do something like the conjugate and don't strength train, but you can tailor your methods based on your goals. And you can add in these days and these focus efforts to do more zone two or to live more actively so you are moving throughout the day and then supplement whatever your end goals are. So that's phenomenal because there's so many ways to tailor what you have said to a given individual so you can be a well-rounded, functionally fit and healthy individual throughout the lifespan. I've
And
one
if you can't do true max effort, do submaximal effort. Work up to an 8.5 or a 9 or an 8. I mean, it doesn't have to be. I mean, training needs, and this is why I'm not really down. Like, I think programs are great, and I think if you're just starting out lifting, doing like Wendler's 5-3-1 or, starting strength or something like that. I mean, that is going to get you as strong as you need to be. But there is a point where you're going to have to auto regulate training, because you've got to work off your daily physical readiness, and if you're doing jujitsu, you're, running, ultra marathons, or if you're doing something that requires a high level of physical exertion, you're going to have to auto regulate your strength training because it cannot take away from what you're trying to do out of the gym. So learning what's best for you is key. And I think follow a program for a while, learn what your load tolerances are, learn what your body adapts to, and then learn how to auto regulate your training. But you got to be honest with yourself. It's like going back to the RPE, you know, you're not going to know what an 8.5 or 9 is unless you've taken yourself to a 10, and I got a feeling a lot of people's 10s are really more like a 9, because 10 is ugly territory, so.
And you're alluding to the fact where it may be beneficial, particularly if you're starting out or you're not sure, to work with a coach. And if you can't do it one on one, we live in an amazing time where you can find someone like yourself online and join communities to learn from them remotely, and even
Yep.
get one on one coaching if you have the money to do so. But if you don't, there are other tier. I follow your account for free for a long time and got so much out of it, so many ideas, and then Substack's an amazing community where you can reach out with questions.
Yeah.
And someone like you're going to respond because you just want to help people. So
Dude,
having a coach.
I will always, I get people that ask me questions all the time. I've invited people to email me or talk privately. If somebody really needs help, I will never not help somebody if I can, man. And I've met so many cool people on Substack, like as a result of that. Like, I'm so fucking important that I can't take 10 minutes out of my day and type somebody a thoughtful response because they care enough to ask a question or they're struggling with something in their training. Come on, man. I mean, nobody's that busy that they can't take a few minutes out of their day to help somebody that needs it. I mean, it's just, don't get me started on the influencers and the celebrities that are too good to talk to you if you DM them, man. I freaking hate that.
You're the man. One other question, and I'm guessing you're going to answer these are just variations, but barbell versus trap bar for deadlifts. There's a lot of debate on that for back health and form technique. What are your thoughts on those
I
two?
mean, the deadlift is a back exercise, and like a conventional deadlift is a fantastic back builder. I think the trap bar, it may not, load the back in a way to get the benefits of quote unquote back strength from the deadlift. But man, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I mean, and I'd say cycle it in. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe one week you take a trap bar. The next week you do like maybe a rack pull or a block pull. The next week you go a little harder. You do a deficit deadlift. That's going to limit the amount of weight you can use while still being really, really hard. Then one week you do a sumo dead. I think, variety is the key because that's how you really, improve your technical proficiency in the lift is by training many variations of it. I'll tell you one of the best things that helped my deadlift, sitting on a freaking chair, man. One of my first visit to Westside, I had a nationally ranked swimmer. He was ranked number one in the 50-meter freestyle in Canada. He swam at Auburn, was 9-time All-American at Auburn, and he specialized in 50-meter freestyle, and he did the 100. Then he was also on the relay team. But when we were prepping for the Olympic trials and for the 2016 Olympics, we went up to Westside, and that was my first visit to the gym. Even though I had met Louis prior to that, that was my first visit to the gym. And like the first day we trained, it was all about my swimmer. Louis and I were, Louis was working with him. I'm asking questions, I'm taking notes and all this stuff. Then we go back the second day, and I'm like, I'm not gonna not train at Westside Barbell, even though I'm the weakest person in here. I am not going to not train. So I said to Louis, I said, hey, can you help me with my deadlift? He's like, get your gear, let's go. And I'm like, no way. So I had basically a private one-on-one deadlift session with Louis. And he's like, man, I got to teach you how to activate your hips better. And I'm like, crap, man, I thought I was using my hips pretty good. So he showed me this exercise. He came up, he called it the chair deadlift, where you literally, he set a chair on the deadlift platform and we put it like 225 on the bar or something. And he's like, okay, he goes, what I want you to do is as you go to pull, when the bar breaks the ground, sit on the chair, arch the shit out of your lower back for like a few seconds, then set the weight down, do that arch again, set the weight down. Then on the third time, when you do the arch, blast off the chair. I never doubled over in the deadlift in any of those reps I did. It was all hips moving horizontally forward. It taught me how to activate my hips in the sumo deadlift like nothing I've ever tried. And I'm like, man, the level of brilliance with that simple technique, because it was a thing that if you do it, you can't do it wrong. And that's what he was so good at that I learned from him. He had these ways of making you do a lift perfectly the first time you do it, and I thought, man, that's really cool. So what I learned from him is that special means where you use special variations of, the primary lifts, that builds your technique. Because if you get good at the safety box or the safety bar low box squat, if you get good, at the giant camber bar wide stance squat, if you get good at the ultra wide straight legged sumos, if you get really good at the chair deadlift, if you get really good at the deficit deadlifts and the rack pulls and all this stuff, and you build those lifts, your regular lifts are going to go up, man. The regular lifts are going to be easy after all that.
The benefit of variation. That's an incredible story and a great way to
But
end.
specialized variation, not just like, hey, I'm going to go play basketball and expect my deadlift to go up. Specialized variation is the key. Yeah.
Targeted, targeted, and man, I love your post, but holy shit, are you just as good on the mic, if not better? This was incredible conversation, man, and I know what I'm gonna be doing as soon as this rib heals up. I actually might be at a pull right now, so I might be sitting in a chair tomorrow, practicing my deadlift form with a barbell. But
Dude,
this was amazing.
I'll if I think of it, man, I do have a YouTube video I did a long time ago where after I learned that chair deadlift from Louis, I came back and I redid it. So I'll send you the video to where I kind of go over like how to do it, but it's such a cool, it'll build the crap out of your hips, man. It's amazing. It's cool variation for sure. And it's more of a teaching tool, but you can use it as a variation in your deadlift, man. It's awesome. Just make sure you wear some knee-high socks because it will rip your shins up, man, because the bar is right on your shins for sure. But
Very good. Well, I appreciate you, brother. This was a blast. We'll definitely be doing it again someday. But
oh, and just in case, my facility partner and jujitsu coach extraordinaire, Chris Jones of Nucleus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, is watching this, which I doubt he is, but if he does come back and watch I'd imagine this will stay embedded on your site or whatever. When I was putting out when I put out the links to this on my socials, he commented, he's like, "Hey, make sure you tell Kyle, about how mentally resilient you are when I've got you under knee on belly." And my reply to him was something along the lines of, "Yeah, that'll be in the first block of the interview, where we go over how to politely tell your jujitsu instructor he needs to lose some freaking weight." So just in case he's watching, I want to make no, but seriously, he's an amazing dude, man. I'm really lucky to have him as a coach, and he's a solid dude. And hopefully, man, if you're ever down in Atlanta, you get to come meet him and come train with us, man, because we'd love to have you. So.
you guys sound like you have an amazing facility, a very cool friendship, and wow, a wealth of knowledge coming out of both of you in two very cool realms to make you a well-rounded human being.
He's a wizard, bro. He is an absolute wizard, man. I hope you get to roll with him one day because it's an experience.
I look forward to that. I hope so too, brother. I appreciate you. Talk soon.
Likewise, man. Thank you.
Yeah, later.